Are you ready? Ready to bring a revolution to your relationships? Ready for the experiences on your dating adventure to evolve? Ready for more passion, intimacy, connection, and love in your relationship? Ready to heal past relationship wounds? You're in the right place. I'm Alan, the love engineer, and this is the Relationship Revolutions podcast. In this series, you'll get guidance and tips from me, interviews from other relationship experts, insights from couples who already have a great relationship, and other mind-opening conversations. So Lisa, welcome to Relationship Revolutions. First two questions for today. How are you and where are you?
How am I? I'm good. I'm really good. I keep seeing on Facebook it's Blue Monday. Well, I've no idea what Blue Monday is, but I'm making it Yellow Monday. Yellow, sunny and bright. And I'm based in Cheadle-Hulme. And for those of you listeners who don't know where that is, it's in Greater Manchester.
Excellent. And there may be one or two people listening that pick up on the accent and say, hang on a minute, she doesn't sound like she's from Manchester.
No, I'm certainly not from Manchester, but I've lived here for a very, very long time. I've lived here since 1977. But where I'm actually from, where I was born in a small village called Lower Gornal, which is near Dudley, which is the West Midlands. It's not Birmingham, it's the Black Country.
Yeah, I've learnt over the years that people from the Black Country get a little bit upset when you tell them they're a Brummie.
Well, look, I've got a company called Findyourtribe.club, and when you belong to a tribe and that's your community and that means the place where you are from, you do get very precious about your tribal community. So yes, over the years people said, "Oh, I love your Brummie accent," and at the end of the day, if people say that, I don't get offended. I'm not going to beat somebody over the head with a club because they've said to me that I've got a Brummie accent. But there is a distinction between the Black Country and Brummies, and Brummies will say exactly the same. So ask me what those distinctions are and the fine nuances. I couldn't exactly tell you, but there is a slight difference.
Yeah. Yeah, when you hear the two next to each other side by side, you can tell the difference.
Mine is quite a sing-song, it's quite sing-song. Ironically, when I moved to Manchester, as I say, in 1977, you get used to the northern dialect and the different nuances, sort of in Manchester, something that I would call a bread cob, they call a barn cake. And so once you get used to all of those different nuances, and then your natural accent begins to soften a little. You don't use some of the colloquialisms because people wouldn't necessarily understand you. And then after I've been here for about 10 years, people used to ask me if I was from Liverpool. And I used to find that really strange, not because I don't like the Liverpool accent at all, but if you put a proper Scouse, a Liverpudlian next to me, speaking, we sound nothing alike. But I think it's because we both have that sing-song lilt. We tend to go up at the end of our sentences when we speak, as opposed to, a little bit of a deeper timbre. So I might say, if I was to say Dudley in my natural accent, it would be, "Oh, Dudley." It goes up at the end. So yeah, so I was considered to be a Liverpudlian, and I worked with a really great regional manager. Oh, sorry, he was an area manager, and I worked at the Abbey National, as it was called back in the day. And he used to call me Scylla with a Brummie accent. I never told him, I never questioned his Brumminess. I didn't tell him it was Black Country. He called me Scylla with a Brummie accent. So. And somebody else has called me that last week, someone from within Circle Network. So I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, so I heard of this said a while back that when someone moves location, they either move for a job, move for a house, or move for a person?
Well, I moved for all three really because I got married in 76 to my first husband. He is a creative and worked in advertising, and he got a job with a northern advertising agency in Manchester. And that meant us relocating, but he came to Manchester for a short while before I moved up as well. But it was at a time where, you know, we hadn't long been married, we were renting a flat and we were looking to buy a house. So we didn't move for the house, but the new house came when we moved. So it's interesting. When you move from your, what I would say, your home ground, and I'm, you know, just to put it into a bit of context, Alan, if I may, I was brought up in a, you know, a family with, I'm the youngest of 8 children. One of my brothers died when he was a baby, but so 7 of us, you know, and I'm the youngest, grew up together. We were quite a close-knit community within our village. You know, everybody knew everybody, and my mum was quite a prominent business person, and our family were pretty well known within the village. I don't mean for a bad reputation, but quite a positive. And so I had lots of lovely friends. You know, I'm still friends with 3 of the, well, 4 actually, of the girls I went to school with, you know, back in the day. I'm happy to say on your podcast that this year I reached my 70 years around the sun. So we've been friends for a very, very, very long time. But I was in that close-knit community, and although I had, you know, I was used to being out and socialising with my friends, I'd never lived anywhere else. I was born in the house that I was raised in, and I left that house when I got married to move into our own flat. But moving to another part of the country seemed like, well, it just seemed like a lifetime, you know, a lifetime away. It was a lifetime's journey. And my only understanding of Manchester, because I didn't understand the geography and and I guess what Manchester was about, apart from Coronation Street. You know, Coronation Street was on the TV. It was a popular, and still is a popular, soap. Although I don't watch the program, but at the time, you know, it was very popular. So my understanding was of, you know, back to backs and all of that sort of stuff. And I also worked for the GPO as a hello girl, you know, so that's number please. You know, I worked in the worked there, and we used to have a team who were called observations, so that they would be listening in to our calls to see whether we were being compliant. We wouldn't be listened into all of the time, but I guess it's like call recording now when you ring a call centre, but these were physical people tapping in and out of your conversations. And they used to have their training in Manchester. So when I told a couple of the people I was moving to Manchester, they went, "Oh my God, we go through a place called Hume on the train. It looks very grey and dismal." So that was my understanding of Manchester, you know, grey, dismal, rainy. And so I wasn't filled with a whole load of anticipation. And I was terribly homesick, you know, when I moved to Manchester. And we actually moved to a lovely area. We got a flat in a really, really lovely area. Nothing like anything that I would have imagined. We moved to on the borders of Altrincham and Hale, which is a lovely suburb of the Greater Manchester area. But I was very, very homesick. And that was quite challenging at the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. When it was back in those days, there was you can't just jump on a video call or send texts every now and again. It's landline telephones and the person's actually got to be there to answer it if you want to speak to them. So it's very, it's very, very different to today. And the first time I left home was to go a little bit farther. I went all the way to Australia, but
Oh,
that's
well, that's a little bit further than Manchester, Alan.
yeah, yeah. That's probably a whole nother podcast in itself. But moving away from home for the first time is always a daunting prospect. Even if for some reason you are trying to get away from your family, you're still going to miss them. You're going to miss the environment. You're going to miss your friends. But at least you had one person that you could get along with. I'm guessing you got along with him because you married him. You must
Oh
have
yeah,
done at the time.
well, we had, you know, I mean, when I met my first husband, I was 17. 17 back in the early 70s. It was very different to how it is now. You know,
Yeah,
you felt that unless you were married by the time you were 25, you were going to be left on the shelf, which I don't agree with, by the way. Now, you know, I mean, I think
yeah,
people to do what's right for them. But so I got married when I was 22, and although I'd got lots of friends who happened to be boys from school, um, I guess my first husband, Mick, was my very first, what I would say, serious relationship. Um, so yeah, I had him, you know, and what was lovely, in all honesty, you know, I'm not the sort of person who I won't hide myself, you know, away and think, oh, I can't speak to people. But he had quite a nice set of friends who he met through work. And I was, you know, I got involved in that social circle. So I started to build new relationships, you know, and finding people who I resonated with. And, you know, my values then were quite, you know, very family orientated. I was hoping that at some stage I would start a family. And I did, you know, in sort of 79, we'd moved 2 years previously. 79, I had my first baby. So I started to build my own little tribe. And as soon as that happened, the visits back home uh, became less frequent. I still went back to where I considered home, where my parents were. You know, I idolized my mum and dad. But because I was building my own tribe, those did become less frequent.
yeah. I can imagine having children does change just about every dynamic of life.
Mm, it certainly does. It certainly does. So yeah,
Especially,
so I guess, you know, my experience of Manchester, and I haven't moved away from here. You know, I mean, I've moved within the local area, uh, but I do love the Northwest, and I have got a phenomenal support network around me. I've got, as I was explaining, you know, I'd moved from home so I'd left my tribe, moved up to here, started to build my own tribe of friends and networks, had my kids, and I guess at the time that the children were little, and this may sound like I'm being, I don't know if it's harsh, but I loved my kids dearly. But I found being at home all the time, just changing, you know, doing nappies, feeding babies, going to mother and baby classes, which are, you know, which are fabulous. I just wanted something more. And so, you know, I got a part-time job in a pub because I like social interaction. You know, I loved social interaction. But at the time, you had to do work that fitted in with, you know, your own personal circumstances. I've sold Tupperware, you know, I've done party plan, and that was my first introduction into network marketing. And but then I got a job when the kids were back at school as a part-time cashier for Abbey National. You know, they were asking people or advertising for people to for female returners to work what in essence were part-time hours, 9:30 to 2:30, which suited me absolutely fabulously. And it was the Abbey who gave me the opportunity to really develop my career. And that's where I developed my career as an HR professional.
So how much of an influence has that move from Dudley up to Manchester and creating a new life, if you will, influenced your decision to set up this thing you call Find Your Tribe?
Um, it had had some influence, clearly, because interestingly, I've been listening on Audible, because I listen to Audible a lot. I do like to read, but I find listening to Audible, it's a bit more convenient because if I'm in the car, if I'm out walking. But I was listening to Audible to a book that Jamie Stewart had recommended that we'd read, within Circle Network that we'd read, called Atomic Habits. But one of the chapters, I think it's Atomic Habit number 7, don't quote me, but it's Atomic Habit number 7, says that we have to, be part of a tribe. We all, as humans, need to feel that we belong. And so I've always wanted to be part of a community. I don't like to follow, I don't like to just follow the norms, but I do like to be part, and I'm always attracted to people who are, I've got something a bit different about them. I like that. I like people's differences. I think that's really important. And so Find Your Tribe came about. It's a recent business venture after really what in essence has been 30 years within HR, and since 2007 in an HR consulting business, my own business, which I've now dissolved, and I'm now doing Findyourtribe.club. So I guess the influence Findyourtribe.club has had from the experience that you described is the fact that feeling of belonging. I know how much I missed my family tribe, and I was in an area where I really didn't know anyone. And then, you talk about there's no internet to keep in touch with your family, but there weren't any real, I guess, any real ways to set up finding your tribe, other than if you went to the pub, or if you were at work, or if you, you'd got friends of your partners, or whatever. So you were restricted really to building a tribe. And I think throughout my life thus far, lots of changes have happened in that life, where the tribe that I have built here has been so supportive. You talk about the relationship revolution, and I'm sure you'll delve into that in a little bit more detail later. But I've been through, I explain my life as it's sort of been in 3 stages. So I've already said I'm 70 this year, so I've had the first 35 years, which was absolutely fabulous. Obviously I left the Midlands, but I turned that into a positive, built a really great tribe, had my children, started my career with the Abbey National. And then in the second 35 years, it was a little rockier. There were a lot of more bumps in the road, let's put it that way. And in that second 35 years, I experienced things like redundancy. I experienced things like death of my parents. Both my parents died by the time I was 42. I experienced divorce, and is quite traumatic, and it's all, and interestingly, my relationship breakdown, the redundancy I experienced, and the death of my parents all happened at the same time, or the death of my mom, all happened at the same time. So that was quite traumatic, and having that tribe around me was so important. I mean, I'm pretty resilient. But that tribe was important. And then later on, I remarried. Was married for about 7 years, although we'd known each other for about 6 years previously. And my husband died. He committed suicide, which, you know, I'm not ashamed to say he committed suicide. Some people are, but he committed suicide. And that was traumatic. And again, my tribe came into being. And then in prior to his suicide, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And again, my friends and my family were absolutely brilliant in supporting me through that. So I think any change that you have in your life, you need that support. So Find Your Tribe Club has been developed really to provide support. And I don't mean I'm a counsellor. I'm certainly not a counsellor, but a safe place where people feel that they've got somebody's got their back. And I'll be facilitating them if people have got some challenges, to facilitate them to speak to people who may be able to help them. You know, so those people will be in that tribe too. So it's like any tribe. You know, if you think about the tribal formation, there's more than one person who looks after you in the tribe. You know, yes, there's often a leader, but there will be other people who are, you know, the person who might be the health professional. It would have been, you know, a herbalist or a medicine doctor or whatever it might be. But there's always a sage, somebody who's got some real great wisdom to be able to share. So I think that's fundamentally what the tribe's about. And as well as working with individuals, you know, business owners, whether they're solopreneurs or they're in quite small businesses, they also need a place where somebody's got their back. So with my business experience and business connections, I can help them, you know, to coach and mentor. I consider myself really to be like a business growth mentor to help those businesses grow. So that's what it's about. It's a community based on values of collaboration, based on connectivity, based on camaraderie, and based on community.
Yes, when you talk about tribes and things like that, there's a few things that come up for me. Firstly, there was an old saying that it takes a whole village to raise a child, and back in the day, it did. But now it's like my friend Joe Horton on the Guild of Dads podcast says a lot of parents have parental martyrdom in that nobody can look after my child but me. So they end up putting so much pressure on themselves and then have these ideas of this is what my child is going to be doing whatever when they're older, and then put a lot of pressure on the child. But I think we could learn so much from the days of the past with the tribes and things. And I always remember a conversation I had out in the Aussie outback with a couple of Aboriginal fellas. As on the plane out there, I read something about in Alice Springs, all these young Aboriginal hoodlums are just causing trouble, getting drunk and all that, and fighting and all this stuff. So I got talking to him, asked him what was behind it. He says, well, there's one thing, we've lost a lot of our culture. We've lost a lot of our land. And it's like the white man came over and says, you've got to live like this or go and live in this corner over here kind of thing. He said, back in the day when we were growing up, they had a thing called initiation or rites of passage. So when you go through that as a boy, you're out in the bush on your own and you truly find yourself. He says, when you've come back from it, you know that you're a man. These young lads don't have that anymore. So they don't even know the men. They don't know what it means to be a man. And it's like they're lost, which made a lot of sense to me. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. How do I know I'm a man? And I had no answer for that other than, oh, I went out and got pissed on my 21st. And it didn't make any sense. Like, why do we not have something like that?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, a lot of, I would say, historical traditions have been lost. You know, when I was a kid, and as I say, that's a while ago, but we never locked out. You know, the only time our doors were locked was at night. when we went to bed, my dad would lock the door, but during the day, anybody could walk in the house. Obviously, we'd lock the door if we went out. I'm not sure my mum used to do that, to be honest, but I know I would always lock the door when I left the house and there was no one else in it. Because people, communities were built on trust, and if people
Yeah.
didn't see you around for a while, they'd check in on you to make sure you were okay. I remember my mum telling me a story, and I mean, obviously, policing's very, very, very different now. But we used to have
Yeah.
a Bobby on the beat, and Mr. Sergeant Pask was the Bobby, and one look from Sergeant Pask, and whatever you were doing, you'd stop. We didn't have to. He didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't have to threaten you with anything. What that respect for authority was there for Sergeant Pask. But at the house I lived in with my parents, we used to have parties. I don't mean every week, but we'd have special occasions, we'd have parties. And of course, there's quite a big tribe of us, and we'd invite the neighbours. And one night there was a knock on the door, and it was the police, because my mum used to, we'd have the fun and games and all that sort of stuff. Quite civilized now compared to parties of today, but they were, let's put it, back in the day, they were considered to be, quite a lively event. And the police knocked on the door. So I'm on, oh yes, Sergeant Pask, we're very sorry there's any noise, we'll turn it down. And they says, oh no, we've had a complaint from one of the neighbours that they'd like you to open the windows because they quite like listening to the sound, but they'd like to hear more of it. And my mum said, oh, come in there, come inside, Sergeant Pask, can we make you a cup of tea or whatever? And the police came into the party. So our raucousness wasn't actually raucousness. It was just good, solid, fun, people enjoying themselves. So I do think that, somehow we've lost that. And I'll go back to your point about saying, it takes a family to raise a child. It's interesting because I have this conversation with my daughter, because I've got two grandkids as well, and one's nearly 12 and the other is 8. And when Grace was born, my youngest, I went over for the birth and all of that sort of stuff. And in Holland, because both my kids live in Holland, they have a kramsorg. And the kramsorg is a person, predominantly female, who come in to every person who has a baby, and it's part and parcel of how they do things there. And they come in for a week to help, not just show you how to care for the baby, but they help you around the house a little bit and make food, and it's really quite nice. And they're looking to make sure that the dynamic and everything that's going on is good, which I guess is a bit like, years and years ago used to be like the district nurse. If you've ever watched Calling the Midwife, I think it is Calling the Midwife, isn't it? They,
Something like that.
back in the 60s, that's what they did. Anyway, I chose not, I said to my daughter, have you thought about this? And she's saying, no, oh, mum, I know what I'm doing. Blah, blah. And I got to a stage where I thought, well, I'm not going to interfere because it's not my place to interfere. But I do sometimes feel that, and this is another thing about the tribe, we forget that people who have got experience from the past can help people in the future. But because there's so much information available now on the net, I think people live by what it says on an app, and yet they don't refer to. And when I say elders in inverted commas, like elders within a tribe. They don't revert to those people who have followed that path because they think, oh, it's outdated, it's old fashioned, or we don't do things like that now. Where actually nothing has really changed. And I remember seeing a very good friend of mine, she's called Dale Stafford, and she used to run a very successful training company in Stockport, which she sold, but then I saw her do a presentation, and she talked about a presentation of her life. And she got to the place where she had her first child, and she said, "Oh, I'd read all the books. You know, Dr. Spock was the absolute child physician at the time. So I read 2 or 3 of his books. I'd got myself prepared." She says, "But the one thing I hadn't taken into consideration when this baby was born, that the baby hadn't read the book." And that's the thing we forget. You can have all the modern technology, you can have all the apps, you can have everything that is absolutely out there, but babies are little humans with all human foibles and all of that sort of stuff. And this sounds like I'm being patronizing now, and I don't mean it to sound like I'm patronizing, but it isn't really rocket science to raise a child. That's why they talk about it takes a village to raise a child, because it isn't about the village absolutely coming round and looking after the baby. It's the people within that village who have got all the wisdom. The people within the village, you'll have your doctor, you'd have the midwife, you'd have you'd have your friends, you'd have people looking out for you. And I think somehow in this world of uber technology, we're so reliant, and I put this down, I say this about me as well, we're so reliant on what is happening behind the screen or happening on our phone that we forget the human connection of getting that advice that could probably help you. And therefore, I'm a bit on a mission to talk about women with wisdom, because my group isn't just for women, by the way. I welcome men to join the group, but in my Facebook group, which is free currently, and I'm launching a membership club, there's 80% women, 20% men, and that doesn't come as a bit of a surprise. Doesn't come as a surprise to me, Alan, because I think women tend to be much more communicative and sharing. And I don't want to say that men aren't, but you'll have a better experience of this in your coaching with relationships. But I do think there's a need for us to start thinking about, there's a lot of women with wisdom. And if you look at Facebook now, older women are getting much, much, much more publicity. We think about the famous older women, Jane Judi Dench, Maggie Smith, famous actors and actresses, there's lots of them out there, but there's ordinary women doing extraordinary things out there who are really forging the way for younger women. And I just think it's really, really important that we look to those guides, because we're all living longer. When I was a kid, my uncle died at 52, and I was 7. And as a child, I thought, oh well, he's an old man. When I got to 52, I realised how young he was when he died. So it's that perspective. The number on the bus, I've said this a load of times, I guess it's my thing. When I reached the age of 50, I was absolutely bereft. I thought, God, I'm 50. What am I going to, oh, God, God, God. And I was driving home back from Manchester along the A34 back home, and I was stuck in traffic at a place called Burnage, and it's notorious for being busy. And as I'm sat in the car, as you do, daydreaming in a traffic jam, I looked up, and in front of me was a bus, and it said 50 on the bus. And it dawned on me that your age is just a number on the bus. What's more important is how you ride that bus, and have the best journey you possibly can, because, the journey ends at some stage. So make it the best journey best journey of your life. So I guess, it's this wisdom thing that I think is really important in tribes. And that's what I'm looking to achieve with this business.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of men do struggle with opening up and communication. A lot of it's the lone wolf mentality, which isn't necessarily a good thing. It has its moments, but when you look at any successful man or whatever, they've not done it on their own. They've had a team around them. But so often it's like we get the idea that we've got to do it on our own to be successful, whether it's our own business, our own family, or whatever. But we still need that team. You still need that tribe. And I've been
Mm.
in groups on Facebook where there's men and women, and there's comments, there's engagement everywhere. And in the groups of men, there's, well, there might be a few crickets and a bit of tumbleweed. And it's almost like we're waiting for someone else to make that first move. It's like a little bit like being that first person onto the dance floor. Once there are other people that are on the dance floor, you'll go and have a dance, but you don't want to be the first one. Even on your wedding day, you don't want to do it.
Well, and it's
Crazy.
interesting. It's interesting, really, because again, I'll revert back to the the Audible book I'm reading, and I think we all know this anyway without listening to it in a book. In order to be accepted into the tribe, whatever your tribe is, you conform to that tribe. So whether the tribe's a good tribe or a bad tribe, when you're in there, you will conform to it. And I guess that's what happens with, you talked about earlier on, your experience when you were in Australia talking to those Aboriginal guys, and how the young people, were out doing drinking and doing whatever they were doing. And so they were forming a different tribe, but that tribe was all about, you know, and an initiation might be, oh, you've got to do XXX to be part of what we're doing now. And even if you're the sort of person who thought, I don't really want to do that, but you do it if you want to curry favor with the rest of the group. And that's what happens in life. I noticed, I no longer drink alcohol, not because I'm an addict or I'm a recovering addict. I don't drink alcohol because um, it impacts on my health. It just doesn't serve me well. So about 4 years ago, I decided not to, I'd have an occasional glass of wine, but it just didn't do well. I thought, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm giving up. But it's very interesting when this. I mean, everybody knows now. All my friends know I don't drink now, so it's not an issue. But being different initially, well, go on, have a drink. No, I don't want one, thanks. And I think that must be very difficult for people who do have an addiction. If that, and that's why I can understand why people go to AA, because if they go to AA or a similar group, they're mixing with people and they feel safe within a tribe that are experiencing the same thing. Because if you go into a situation where that temptation is there and somebody's egging you along, it might be easy. I mean, I can't speak as an addict, but that must be very, very difficult. So exactly what you were saying there, Alan, people conform to the tribe that they're in. So that's
Yeah.
why you have to find a tribe that lifts you up. A tribe that brings you down is not the place where you need to be, unless you want to be, a person who just likes moaning and talking about negative stuff. If that's where you want to be, that's absolutely fine. But I prefer to be in a much more upbeat and optimistic tribe. And if I can, with small incremental steps, change the mood and the vibe of that tribe, I will do my best to do that, because they do say you are the sum total of the 5 people that you know most, that are your closest connections.
Yeah. The first time I heard that, I looked at the people I hang around with and I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then to go from that to another group of 5 people, you've got to change a lot sometimes to fit into that.
Well, this is how I would view that, Alan. If you Look, over the years, and I would say, I've talked about my life being in, 3 phases. I've talked about the first 2 phases, up to being 35 and up to being 70. Now, my next 35 years, and I mean that, the next 35 years, it's continuing what I've started in my, probably in my 40s, where I'm very committed to personal development. And I do a lot of, I listen to Audible books, I do online learning. I've got a part of my Find Your Tribe. I've got tools that people can access called Findyourtribe.club, which is a personal development online portal. And I believe that your tribe will naturally change when you get into things if you start to do stuff that other people enjoy, you naturally gravitate. I don't mean one day I'm with, this group of people, and then the next day I'm with this group of people. I think it's about a natural transition. It's like relationships, you might, you know this better than I, but in my experience, in my first marriage, we were very much, together. We had the same values. We wanted, we were striving towards the same goals. But, I was 17 when I met my first husband. I think he was 21, 22. Things change as you get older. And that's what we have to accept, things change. But that didn't change one day, everything was wonderful, and the next day it wasn't. It's transition. And that's obviously relationship ended in divorce. I mean, he and I, we've got kids in common. How can I not have a relationship with my first husband when we've created 2 beautiful children? But the reality is, if you feel that you're in the wrong place, my advice is find a place, something that you are passionate about, and pursue that. And then suddenly you'll start to meet people. You will send off an energy, because I definitely believe your energetic vibrations will attract the people that you want to be with. If your energetic vibration is in sync with people that you, or sort of in sync with the people you don't really want to be with, then there's a disconnect. So you need to find a way. So it might be a hobby, it might be, joining some sort of online learning, it might be joining we met through a networking group, which I love. I love that, the vibe of that club, Circle Networks. But I also like the vibe of my own club. We've been out and we've had a few what I would call social events. And then, a dozen of us have gone out and perhaps had afternoon tea, or we've done other stuff. But we're all people of a very similar vibration. So of course we enjoy ourselves and we learn from each other. So to me, that is important. You can't just wave a magic wand and think, oh, I'm with the wrong crowd now, and tomorrow I'm going to be with the right crowd. It does evolve.
Yeah.
And you will find as you move, the people who no longer bring you joy will be the people who drop off your radar.
Yeah, very much so. So when we spoke briefly before Christmas, there was something you said that caught my attention. And you said you'd been married, you'd been divorced, and you'd been widowed. And you mentioned that you'd rather, if you were to have either of those experiences again, you'd rather be widowed because it was so much easier.
Well, I think what I said, I think what I said to you, I've been married and I've been widowed, and I found, for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else, I found death easier. And if I can explain what I mean by that, Alan, when you love someone and then you, for whatever reason, the relationship breaks down, and my first husband, he met someone else, and obviously I was devastated, as you can probably imagine. And I'm not the only person to have ever experienced that, and I don't think I will be the last person to ever experience that. But you know, I was beside myself. I felt I was left on my own with two children. I was trying to navigate all of that in my mind. And I'll talk about in my mind because this is what we do. We make things up in our head.
Yep.
He was having a wonderful time. He was in a new relationship. This is in my head. Yeah. He was doing this, he was doing that, and I was missing out. And when he came to see the kids, I'd see him and I think, oh, you know, there was always that connection, and there is still always that connection. And you know, we went through some very difficult times after we split up, and you know, and I'm sure he would say the same. But the thing that we have in common were our children, and so our children was the glue that kept us together. In you know, kept us, I guess, working towards a proper outcome. But you always see the person, and I feel desperately sorry for people, and I really do, because I know this does happen, who can never let go of that feeling of connection to the person that they've loved and lost in from a divorce or from a breakdown in a relationship, because they're still living and breathing. They live in the same village. They might see them from day to day. So it's a constant reminder that, you know, they hark back to the past. When someone dies, and I said, you know, it was quite traumatic when my husband died because he took his own
Yeah.
life. And perhaps I might have felt different about this if it had been a much more natural way to pass away. But death is final. You know, I can't, you know, although it was traumatic in terms of could I have done anything different? You know, what did I do wrong? All of that sort of stuff, which I had counselling for, because I believe any trauma that you have like that, you need to get professional help. You know, people say, oh yeah, I can cope, I can deal with stuff. You've got to get professional help. You know, if you can get it, you know, don't not do it. And perhaps that helped me get through that grieving process, because I didn't have that when I broke up from my first husband. You know, I didn't have the insight or the wisdom to speak to somebody like you, Alan. Then I had to learn that for myself. And you know, and we hang on to relationships for a long time, but when someone dies, it's final. You know, yes, I grieved for the person that I had lost, and I felt, and it was very deep, but I was never thinking, oh, am I going to see him with somebody else now? Am I going to see him around the corner? If I go out to a restaurant, will he be there with such and such a person? Can I go to that restaurant? Do I have to move to the other side of the country to not be able to see? So that's what I meant. I didn't want to make it sound like a black and white thing. You know, some people might find divorce easier, and death they find it very difficult to deal with, because the reality is probably now, Alan, you know, when someone is being coached and guided by someone like you, if you can, you know, Catherine Wood, I think she's called Catherine Woodward Thomas, talks about conscious uncoupling, which I think everybody
Yeah.
laughed about when Chris and, you know, when who
Gwyneth
was it?
Paltrow.
Yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris, they did this unconscious uncoupling, which was born out of Catherine Woodward's experience. Actually, I think if you go through that process with someone like you, where you can unconsciously, you know, consciously split yourself, not just divorce yourselves legally, but divorce yourselves emotionally, but still come out at the other side where you can still be friends, then
Yeah.
perhaps if that had have happened to me, perhaps death would have been the worst scenario for my second relationship. But my experience, I found getting divorced and, you know, being a one parent family and all that sort of stuff so devastating, that when my second husband died, because there was a process to go through and it was final, it seemed easier. So
Yeah.
I always advocate that, you know, do something to make any breakup of your relationship, do something that will, for yourself, if the other person doesn't want to do it, that's up to them. But do something for yourself that puts you in a place where you think, this is a part of my life that I've loved, I've enjoyed it. If that has been the case, I'm at a different place now. Now I need to move on to something different. And I think with the guidance of someone like you, Alan, people can do that.
Yeah. So I think well, there's a couple of things that come up when you speak like that. One is that in this day and age, I think divorce is a little bit more socially acceptable than it's been in previous generations. Because I certainly felt like when my wife left me, that it was very much like as if I'd failed. Where in hindsight, having done the inner work, we should never have got married. We weren't aligned. In the end, the only two things we had in common were our children and the address, and that was it. It's not surprising at all. But if you don't do that inner work, it's a lot harder. It's harder to get closure. It's harder to make sense of it. It's harder to leave the past in the past and also learn from it, because you don't see what's in the blind spots of the picture of your life.
I totally agree with you, Alan.
Yeah,
totally agree. Yeah, it is really
I
important.
think
I mean, you talk about social acceptance of divorce, probably not in your lifetime, but most certainly in my lifetime, in the upper echelon circles. I'm a royalist. I loved our queen, our late queen, and I guess I had a connection with our late queen because I was the result, I think, of a very happy coronation celebrations, because I was born 9 months after the coronation. So I loved our queen. My name is Lisa, which is a derivative of Elizabeth, and my middle name is Victoria, which is also another strong monarch that we've had within the country. And I don't want to get into a debate whether people agree with the monarchy or they don't agree with the monarchy. I happen to be a royalist. But, in my lifetime, Princess Margaret couldn't marry the man she wanted to marry because he was a divorcee. Now, look how times have changed.
Yeah.
That you weren't accepted into certain social circles if you were a divorcee. I remember my eldest sister getting divorced a long, long time ago, and she was seen as a scarlet woman because she got divorced. I mean, and now, I think sadly it's more commonplace. I think what I find sad is that, I think people now know that if they get married and it's a mistake, well, they can just get divorced. And it's the, I think it's the emotional trauma, not just for them, but if
Yeah.
they have kids, it's the emotional trauma for the children and for the rest of their family. And it has an impact then on their tribe, because you will get people who take sides. So if you've got a social tribe, or one friend takes sides with the other and the other friend takes sides with the other, and then suddenly you've got the grief of not seeing your friends who you have great relationships with. So it's a domino effect in actual fact, Alan. So, getting it right to try and alleviate some of that pressure, to me, is really important.
Yeah. For me, it's like when your partner dies, the door's closed. Whereas with divorce, it's that constant revolving door, but you've got no idea who's coming through that door next, or what challenge or what problem. And if you've got children with that person, if it's been, especially if it's not been amicable or one's been abusive, it's very, very difficult to actually completely divorce a person. Yeah, it might be divorced on paper, but you've still got to see each other for the children. and do your best to be amicable with somebody that's unamicable, it is a very challenging experience, especially if you're going through it alone. It's like I spoke to Dave Kite, a divorce consultant, on here a few weeks ago, and he says there's three parts to the divorce. There's the financial side, there's the emotional side, and there's a legal side. And we go to the divorce solicitors looking to fulfill all three. Whereas they're exceptionally good at the legal side. Some dabble with the financial side, but it takes them a while. And that's about where it stops. They've not got a lot in the emotional realm, especially if it's not something they've experienced themselves. Because I had no idea what it was like until I experienced it. I just thought, I just sign a piece of paper, stop seeing each other, and job done. It's not like that at all.
No, it's not. And it continues, you know, the longer you're at, and I say this loosely, at war with the other person, the impact it has on those surrounding. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you can get lost. You know, and I absolutely hold my hands up to this, you know, when I went through divorce, you know, I was very, very angry for a long time. You know, I went through the change curve, you know, didn't accept it. Then I got angry, then I had the grief process. But that took me a long time to get through. And when you've got other people pecking your head, if you understand the expression, you
Yeah.
know, tell you what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, you can ask 100 people what you should do, and you'll get 100 different answers. You've got
Yeah.
to find your own path, but you can't always do that path totally on your own. You do need someone to guide you. You know, you do, because if you've not experienced in the past, and even if you have experienced divorce in the past, and people are, you know, have gone through this 2 or 3 times, every time is different for whatever
Yeah.
reason, you know. So I think whatever you do in life that is going to be traumatic, you really need to have somebody who is totally impartial and has your back.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for that expression that prevention is better than cure. That's why we go and get a car serviced, to
Mhm.
prevent a breakdown. That's why we have the gas boiler serviced, to prevent a breakdown. And then it comes to raising children and being in intimate relationships, for which we've had a lot of the time no training at all. And we're like, okay, I got this.
And you're
Why
right.
not?
I think you made an absolute perfect point there. You know, whatever you do in life, we get, you know, a regular, you know, you get somebody to look at your car, you get your gas boiler looked at. But when it's breaking down, or before it breaks down, and why don't we do that with our relationships? Is
Yeah.
it perhaps because we have a sense of failure, that we've done something that we've done something personally, so we've taken it on ourselves. We must be, you know, we must not be very good people if we can't sort this out for ourselves, because we are brought up to be, you know, well, guys particularly, you said it about earlier on, guys feel that they have to work things out, you know, from an evolutionary point of view. You know, it's 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 my responsibility as the male head of the tribe to sort everything out. Well, no, you've got to be able to try and sort it out together. So I do think that people are getting more, I guess, transparent with their emotions. Apart from, you know, I do find it very difficult when people are ranting about breakdowns of relationships and all that sort of stuff, and they're doing it all on social media, looking for, in essence, some sort of sympathy or support from their
Validation.
followers and validation. But again, as I say, if you get 100 comments, you'll get 100 people, or there will be people who look at all the comments and think, oh, I'll agree with that one. So again, they're affirming something that it might not resonate with you, but you do it because that's what everybody else has suggested that you do.
Yeah.
And
with
people,
those social media posts, you've only got one side of the story.
exactly. You've only got one side of the story. And it always takes two to tango, Alan. As my mum used, it's an old saying, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other.
Absolutely.
So it always takes two in a relationship. It's not one person's fault.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
don't want to call it a fault, because I think that's the wrong word to use, because it's no one's fault. It's just the situation.
Yeah. Two people influence that situation within the relationship. And
Yeah.
sometimes the external influences are the ones that cause the problem.
Mm.
But then it still comes back to those two in that relationship as to how they respond or deal with that external influence.
Definitely.
So, Lisa, how can anyone listening to this and thinking, I could do with a new tribe? How can they find you?
Well, connect with me on Facebook. I'm Lisa Victoria Harper on Facebook. You can connect with me there. You can find Findyourtribe.club as a group on Facebook. I have if you zap my QR code up on the screen at the back, that will give you my contact details. So get in touch and connect with me via any of the popular ways to connect on social media. I've got an Instagram account called Findyourtribe.club. So just connect via all the usual methods, and my email is lisa@findyourtribe.club.
Excellent. So, a question I ask every guest, but do not prime them for. As this podcast is called Relationship Revolutions, if there was one thing that would bring a revolution or an evolution to the world of dating and relationships, what would that one thing be?
What would that one thing be? I think dating apps. I'm not sure. I think it's about honesty. I don't think dating apps. I'm not saying the dating apps aren't honest. I think sometimes the people on the dating apps aren't honest. And that's been my past experience. I would say it's about being authentic. Being authentic. Don't lie about your age, what you're doing. Well, I think about being authentic. And it's about showing other people kindness. For me, for Mr. Right to pass my door, he's got to be able to deal with a person who absolutely values kindness and kindness. So people need to be more kind to each other. Don't have unrealistic expectations of what I need to be like, what this person looks like. I need to look like this. We are human. We come in all shapes and sizes. Intrinsically, we all need to have a partner in life, whatever that partner is, male, female, non-binary. You need to have the same values, so that you're working towards the same thing. That would be my advice. Make it a values driven relationship, as opposed to, oh, they look good, or they wear the best clothes. What are they like inside? What is really, really at the heart of them as a person? And I'm wearing a heart, look, Alan. I put that on specifically
You
today.
are indeed.
Oh, I'll put a little heart on for the love engineer.
Love it. Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure having you on. So, Lisa, final question. Is there anything that you think the listeners might want to hear from you and haven't that you'd like to share with them today?
So my philosophy is this. I've already said about 4 times that I'm coming up to 70 this year. People think when you get to a certain age in your life, you're old and decrepit. You're not. It's a mindset. You need to be thinking about what you can do for the rest of your life. Jane Fonda talks about, I put an article in my Find Your Tribe club, talks about, aging is a gift. We're filled with wisdom. It's a staircase that we still need to continue to climb, or in my analogy, it's a bus we still need to ride. So it ain't over till it's over. Don't give up. Whatever you want to do, whether you've been through a divorce or a bereavement and you think life is over, no, it isn't. It's about finding your purpose to do what needs to happen next to live the best life you possibly can. That's my top tip.
And a fantastic tip it is. And on that note, thank you, and we will see each other again in the world of the online space very, very soon.
Thank you, Alan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. And if you haven't already, please leave me a review on your preferred podcast platform. Click the like button and also subscribe so that you get the new episode notifications. I'm curious, what did you take away from this episode? Please share your takeaways with me. Send me an email to relationship-revolutions@theloveengineer.rocks.